The Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But by this time, the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, and the wind was rising against them. And early in the morning, he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And he said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened and began to sink. He cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Please be seated. In last week's Gospel, we heard that Jesus was tired and wanted to get away from it all. But the crowds followed him, and he ended up healing many who were sick. Then everyone was tired and hungry, so Jesus fed them. At the beginning of today's reading, Jesus sends the disciples on to the other side of the lake, and he goes up to the mountain to pray. By sending the disciples away, he finally gets some alone time to rest and prayer. Meanwhile, back in the boat, the disciples are not having a good day, or rather a good evening, because it was nighttime when they went out. In verse 24, we're told that the boat is being battered by the waves and is still far from its destination because the wind is against them. It's a frightening thing to be in a small boat far from shore in a storm. Been there, done that. But Matthew never says that the disciples are afraid of the storm. Certainly, they must be exhausted. They're coming off a very tiring day of managing a large crowd, and they've been rowing all night. But they're fishermen. They know what to do in a storm. Then, Jesus comes walking across the water, and now they're terrified. They think he's a ghost. But Jesus speaks to them, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Then Peter, dear Peter, says, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." Jesus responds, "Come." So Peter gets out of the boat and begins to walk across the water toward Jesus. Now, we know something's going to go wrong. Even if we haven't heard this particular story about Peter before, all we have to do is look back at what we know about him, and we know something is going to go wrong. And sure enough, Peter notices the strong wind. I don't know about you, but if I had been rowing against a strong wind for several hours and constantly bailing water out of the boat to avoid sinking, I would have noticed the wind before I stepped out of the boat. But this is Peter, every preacher's favorite disciple, a pillar of faith with a bad case of foot-in-mouth disease. Or as one commentator puts it, an impetuous man whose spontaneity is not matched by his stability. And sure enough, in our text today, he realizes just what he's done, and he is terrified. As he starts to sink, he cries out, "Lord, save me." Jesus, of course, immediately reaches out and lifts him up and puts him back safely in the boat. "You of little faith," Jesus says, "why did you doubt?" In our readings today, the very human Peter is not alone. He is joined in his humanness by Elijah, who is arguably the greatest of the early prophets of Israel. After all, he doesn't die, but instead is carried up into heaven in a chariot of fire. He appears along with Moses at the transfiguration of Jesus. He stops the rain for 7 years and starts it again, all with his prayers. And he calls down fire from heaven to consume an offering to God. That's what's just happened before today's reading. Elijah defeats the prophets of Baal in a spiritual contest to see which one of their gods will respond when asked to send fire. He then leads the faithful of Israel in slaughtering said Baal prophets and every Israelite who is joined in their worship. And after this demonstration of God's power, he is afraid of the anger of Jezebel, the queen, who wants to kill him for his actions. So he runs away and hides in a cave. A lot happens on his journey to the cave, but that's a different sermon. When we join him there, he is none too happy about his situation. When God asks, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" he kind of whines. "I have been very zealous for the Lord God, the horrible God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword, and I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." God is sensitive to Elijah's delicate emotional state and decides to come and be present with him. God tells Elijah, "Go outside the cave, for I am going to pass by." Elijah witnesses the 3 traditional pre-Jesus signs of God appearing to the people: wind, earthquake, and fire. But God is not in any of these signs. Instead, God chooses to appear in sheer silence. I grew up reading this in the Revised Standard Version, the predecessor to the New Revised Standard Version, which we use down in worship. So I remember God appearing as a still, small voice. Those who grew up with the King James will also remember that phrase. Other translations have used words like a gentle breeze, a light, silent sound, a sound of gentle blowing. My favorite, as I was searching for translation, says, "There was a sound, thin, quiet." So what is sheer silence anyway? My first instinct was that this is something we, living in a city in the 21st century, simply cannot experience. But now, I'm beginning to understand that this silence is not the absence of noise. One of my online colleagues writes, "Sheer silence is not a negative, not an absence at all, but an overwhelming presence, an awesome thing." This, he says, is why we often whisper when we pray, or why "I love you" is often spoken so softly. It isn't hesitance or a need for privacy. It's a tribute to the silence of special places and special moments. Elijah was conditioned by the world he lived in to look for God in really huge events. I mean, Moses got a burning bush. This made it hard for Elijah to experience the presence of God in the cave where he was hiding. God, who certainly could have been present in the silence of the cave, took him outside to show him that those big moments are not always the God moments. And what about Peter? Bet you were wondering if I was going to get back to him. Commentators have always placed a big emphasis on the fact that Jesus, after picking Peter up, tells him he has little faith. Why did you doubt? For 2,000 years, Peter has been critiqued for asking for a sign. If it is you, command me to come to you. Peter is also faulted for taking his eyes off Jesus. He noticed the wind, remembered the storm, lost his focus, and this, many say, is why he began to sink. A newer thought, at least for me, is that Peter is looking for the proof of the presence of God And that's why he left the boat in the first place. So instead of thinking, if he had enough faith, he could have walked on water, maybe we should consider, if he had enough faith, he would have believed the word of Jesus that came to him in the boat. Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid. How would that affect the message that we take from the story? What I heard as a child and an adult was, if we have enough faith, we can overcome all of our problems in spectacular and amazing ways. This message can easily fail us when our lives are shattered by the realities of accident, disease, and aging, leaving us feeling guilty over our lack of faith. Faith is not being able to walk on water, but daring to believe in the face of all the evidence that God is with us in the boat. Made real in the community of faith that surrounds us as our boat makes its way through the storm battered by the waves. God has given us rational minds that tend to think in terms of either or. Either Peter and Elijah are men of unbelief, or they are men of great faith. That's logical, but not necessarily true to life. Think about our lives, yours and mine. Sometimes we believe absolutely and positively. I wish I had a pulpit I could pound on. God is with us. God's presence gives us all the strength we need to face whatever life sends our way. But sometimes we have little faith. This happened to me a lot during the year that my dad was sick and died. And there are other things that have caused me to doubt that God was present in my life. Things that sent me out of my boat in search of God, who was sitting quietly back at the oars, very gently whispering, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." God is with us, whether we are in the boat or wandering across the water, looking in all the wrong places. Listen for the sheer silence. Listen for the presence.